Greetings. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out for our group author reading. This reading is brought to you by Strong Women, Strange Worlds, which is a group of authors supporting authors. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and non-binary authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like these bi-monthly virtual quick read sessions. You can find out more about Strong Women, Strange Worlds in the handout that will be provided in the chat and by visiting our website, and this link will also appear in the chat, strongwomenstrangeworlds.weebly.com. I'd also like to take a moment to especially thank those who are able to make tip jar donations. Thank you. We really appreciate your support. I am your host today, Elaine Isaak. You can find out more about me in the provided handout as well. Please note that recording this session by the audience is not allowed. Recording of electronic communications, including Zoom meetings and webinars without permission, is illegal. Today, we'll be featuring 6 authors: Kerrie Faye, MaryAnn Johanson, Jean Marie Ward, Libby Schultz, Carina Bissett, and Megan Bontrager. Each author will have 8 minutes to read. Our first reader today is Kerrie Faye.
Hi, good morning from Colorado. I'm barely awake, but we'll get through this. I am reading from my YA fantasy novel, Dead Girl. It is a paranormal thriller. Chapter 1. Teetering on the edge of the diving board, Ember O'Neill's world slowed down. Not like a slow motion snail's pace, but the milliseconds between seconds kind of slow. Her pupils contracted as her gaze connected with her assailant. She saw his curled lips slide into a sneer from where he stood at the pool's edge. Drops of perspiration beaded on top of his pimpled, freckled nose like tiny, shiny orbs, and his aura flared, a dangerous maroon outlined in pitch black. At that moment, she understood that Wayne Wilson wanted to humiliate her in front of everyone at the back-to-school pool party and destroy any hope she ever had of fitting in. Her stomach sank, along with any hope that this year would be different. His grin stretched as he pulled the trigger. Red paint shot out of the water gun, forming bloody streaks in the air. A cherry rainbow arched across the pool. The first spray splashed across her pale face and white bikini. The liquid felt cool and heavy across her hot skin. The crowd noise fell into a collective hush while the music blared. Ember's lashes instinctively fluttered closed. Like a hummingbird trapped in a glass cage, wings thumping with no escape, her heart hammered in her chest. She braced herself for the next assault as Madison Miller's cackle broke through the muffled silence, shattering her last shred of dignity. It was clear her plans for sophomore year were just a fantasy, the desperate dreams of a high school outcast. White-knuckled, her fists relaxed, shoulders slumped. She released her last breath. Ember O'Neill didn't have a death wish, but it just became her plan B. Chapter 2, 1 week earlier. Fingers smudged with charcoal, Ember hurriedly ripped off the insanely optimistic list she made the night before on her drawing pad. She had fallen asleep in her childhood treehouse again. Though little more than a renovated deer stand in the woods behind her house, it was her sanctuary. After being diagnosed with synesthesia, she often felt overwhelmed. Even out in the woods, her high-functioning senses were activated. But the sights, sounds, and scents out there were familiar, not jarring, like when she's at school around others and their auras. Seeing colors, as her mom described it, was draining, if not overwhelming. With her large breed dog and best friend Bear at her heels, Ember jogged into the house. The storm door slammed closed behind them. Her father's morning brew percolated in the chip carafe by the sink. Without words, he raised his hand in greeting from the living room. Smoke from his cigarette clouded his aura. He leaned forward in the recliner, listening to the news. Ember continued into the ranch-style house, yelling, "Bertie Mae, I need your help." Her mother, Bertie Mae, insisted Ember never call her mom. She said that made her feel old, and she was too young to feel old. Once inside her bedroom, she taped the list to the mirror over her dresser. For her first day of sophomore year, Ember had goals. Her lips slid into a satisfied smile at her reflection. She popped open the prescription bottles lining her dresser, then swallowed the pills dry. Depressed and dejected her freshman year, it had been a nightmare and culminated with her as the joke of Wilson High. So back to the local doctor, who upped her dosages again. In 3 short months of summer, though, Ember had gained some confidence. Maybe it was the pills, but she was willing to give Wilson County High one more shot. She gazed at her list. Goal number 5 was written in bold, all capitals. Get a boyfriend. She had drawn hearts around the word. A soft chuckle emerged from her throat. Yeah, the pills are definitely working. She had sincere hope for goal number 1, though. Get a bestie. Eric Grossman didn't count, though, and lately his aura had made her uncomfortable. No, she needed a girlfriend, someone she could talk to about boys and not worry about hurting their feelings. Besides, all the heroines in her favorite books had a best friend. It would be the perfect way to start sophomore year. I'm going to stop there. But if you enjoyed this reading, please sign up for the giveaway. The form will be given to you, I think, at the end. But I will be giving away 1 signed paperback and an ebook. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Kerrie. I don't know how many of us appreciate being cast back into high school, but we can certainly relate to that character, possibly a whole awful lot. Sounds like a fun story. Our second reader today is MaryAnn Johanson. MaryAnn Johanson is a writer from New York City, now living in London, who thinks way too much about such inconsequences as movies, books, and the meaning of life. She is primarily a film critic. She founded flickphilosopher.com in September 1997, but is starting to dabble in genre fiction. MaryAnn, over to you.
Hi, everybody. So I am reading a story from Cultural Artifacts, which is a collection of flash fiction, which are very, very short stories. This one is called A Parable of Beauty, Vanity, Greed, and Witchery. Once upon a time, there was a young woman whose exceptional beauty was exceeded only by her great vanity and insatiable greed. When she wasn't spending long hours admiring herself in the mirror in her boudoir, she would don a veil and walk among the citizenry or sit in the finest public house on the poshest street, and she would charge the townspeople or the tavern-goers 20 silver pennies each to gaze privately upon her face. Sometimes a stranger would scoff at how many clients she drew. Every town has a woman who is most beautiful, the doubter would say. Why should I pay to look upon this one when beauty, while rare, may be seen anywhere? And then occasionally, one of the women's generous patrons would pay for a dismissive stranger to behold her visage, and the stranger would gasp and come to appreciate just how extraordinary her beauty was. And so word of her surpassing splendor would spread even further. This was how her greed and vanity grew as well. One day, a very ugly, very old, very wise witch came to town. She had not previously heard of the woman who was so beautiful that others would pay to behold her, and so she became the latest to scoff. But this time, the young woman, recognizing the witch's power, suggested a trade. "Old witch," the young woman said, "I will trade you a glimpse behind my veil, if in return you will tell me the secret of preserving my beauty for all time." For the young woman knew that she would not remain young forever. Only just that morning, in fact, she had plucked the very first gray hair from her temple. And so now she was terrified of what would become of her once she could no longer pass a day delighting in her visage, and in the tinkle of the coins of those who paid to do so. The witch considered the young woman and her offer. "Is this truly what you desire?" the witch asked. "For the essence of beauty is in its ephemeral nature. Beauty is in the buds of spring giving way to the green blooms of summer, and then the gold foliage of autumn." The young woman laughed, and not kindly. "Do you mean to tell me, old witch, that you were once beautiful like me?" The old witch smiled, as if she held a secret behind it. "I was never beautiful like you, though I had other charms, and still do. I merely wish to ascertain that to freeze your beauty forever is what you genuinely wish." "It is," the young woman said. "Very well, then," the old witch said. And so in the privacy of the tavern snug in which the young woman was ensconced, she lifted her veil so that the old witch might behold her face. The old witch gasped, and as so many others had before. Exquisite skin like the morning's first cream, eyes of a blue that would make the sky jealous, cheekbones like the swell of the sea, hair of richest honey. The old witch forgot herself for a moment, contemplating a comeliness that seemed somehow beyond human, something divine, perhaps even something that did indeed deserve to survive long beyond its natural life. Then the old witch returned to her senses and saw once more merely a vain youngster before her. But the old witch also gleaned from her own unexpected reaction to the other woman's loveliness how she might grant the promised boon. "Truly you are lovely," the old witch said. "I shall return tomorrow with a potion that will ensure that your beauty endures for all time." The old witch did as she promised. She always did as she promised, and returned to the tavern the next day to deliver the potion to the beautiful young woman. "Drink this before you sleep tonight," the old witch instructed the young woman, "and 3 days hence you shall begin to see your beauty being preserved for eternity." The young woman did not thank the old witch, merely accepted the potion and dismissed her. The old witch went on her way, unperturbed, and thought not on the young woman ever again. On the third morning after the young woman drank the potion, she awoke to discover that her left leg had turned to porcelain. This delighted her. She had often been told by captivated admirers that her skin was like the finest china, and now it was so. But her leg was even more gorgeous than that. It was painted with a delicate pattern of birds and flowers and curlicues, all in warm, sweet colors. Her leg was newly magnificent in a way that the young woman never could have anticipated, never could have ever imagined to ask the old witch for. She was quite satisfied. On her porcelain leg, she hobbled down the most exclusive avenues of the town, as was her daily wont, to that superior tavern. Only today, in addition to accepting coin for the viewing of her face, she also accepted coin for the viewing of her leg. Oh, only to the knee. She was a properly brought-up young woman. As always, her customers were astonished with the beauty of her face, but on this day they went away raving also about her stunning and surprising new leg. The young woman knew that on the next day she would have devotees queuing out the tavern door and down the street. But the next day she woke to discover that her right leg had also turned to porcelain and was covered with a design that was different from, yet a pleasing accompaniment to, that of her left leg. She could no longer walk, and so made herself comfortable in her bed, which was not at all difficult, as her bed was plush and luxurious, made up with the softest linens and the plumpest pillows. She sent her maid away to alert the tavern owner that she would be receiving visitors in her boudoir. And she had twice as many visitors as usual. They did indeed queue into the street, and all departed in awe, and spread new word that her beauty had moved into a realm that was now beyond striking, and was, truly, unlike anything that the townspeople had ever laid eyes on before. On the next day, she woke to find that there was a profound pain where her porcelain legs met the flesh of her torso, and she sent her maid away for the town doctor. The doctor was one of the region's richest men, due to his great skill in healing, and hence also one of the young woman's greatest and most frequent admirers. Now he made a tisk-tisking noise with immense sadness. "My dear," the doctor said softly to the young woman, "I am afraid that your lovely new legs are festering." "Oh, no!" the young woman exclaimed. "Well," the doctor said, "not the legs themselves, not the porcelain, you see, but the flesh where the porcelain meets it. I'm afraid they must come off, my dear." "Oh, no!" the young woman exclaimed again. The doctor smiled, for he was heartbroken over the beautiful young woman's distress, and wished to placate her. "I have a proposal, though, my dear," he said. "If you agree, I shall purchase the legs from you," and he named a princely sum. "Oh, my," the young woman said, for it was indeed a princely sum. But she worried that no one would again have the opportunity to gaze upon her handsome china legs. "But will you keep them hidden away?" she asked the doctor. The doctor had indeed thought to keep them hidden away for his own pleasure alone, but now he had a new thought. "Of course not, my dear," he said. "I shall display them in my surgery and ask all onlookers for a donation to gaze upon them, and I will share, shall we say, a quarter of the takings with you." "Oh, yes," the young woman agreed immediately. And so the doctor removed her lovely porcelain legs and did exactly as he said he would. He discounted his usual fee for amputation. And news of the young woman's beauty, and of the two distinct opportunities to gaze upon it, spread further still. And that's where I'm going to stop. This is the last story in the collection. So if you want to finish it and find out what happens to the young woman and her legs, you can check out the book. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, or for everybody who signs up for my mailing list through Strong Woman, Strange Worlds, I will give everybody a copy of the ebook. So thank you very much for listening.
Wow, MaryAnn, that was fascinating. We were all right there with you, and then we're like, no, don't end now. But fill out the form, get the freebie. Everybody's happy, except perhaps the young woman with her porcelain legs, or without them, as the case might be. Our third reader today is Jean Marie Ward. Jean Marie Ward writes fiction, nonfiction, and everything in between. Her credits include a multi-award nominated novel, numerous short stories, and 2 popular art books. The former editor of CrescentBlues.com, she is the author-interviewer for BookBail.com and a frequent contributor to the online convention Continual. Jean Marie, over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, Elaine, and thank you all for joining us here today. I will be reading from the collection that you see here. It's called Dragons, Cats, and Formidable Femmes. And my story will be one of the new stories that is in that collection. It's called Potted Demons. Potted Demons. Holy Saturday, 1723. The canebrake rustled a warning. Step, my cautious step. Something larger than a house cat, but smaller than a cougar, sidled through the brush at the edge of the clearing. The vampire Quentin de Charnay's hands stilled over the dead egret in his lap. The crackle of his campfire, the cries of the local wildlife must be playing tricks on his ears. No sane person padded barefoot through the mud and snake-infested weeds of Les Sieurs de Bienville's Nouvelle-Orléans. In the dark. No, there it was again. Definitely human. No other animal within the scope of Quentin's supernatural senses, skulked on 2 feet. He set the carcass on the ground next to a napkin covered with long silver plumes culled from the bird's head and back. De Bienville's cook wanted a spectacular centerpiece for the commandant's Easter feast. The cook would pay well for the 2 egrets Quentin trapped earlier that evening, but Quentin needed more. The Company of the Indies didn't care that he had been kidnapped and transported to Louisiana against his will. His passage home would cost a fortune, the same as for anyone else. The price of vengeance would be higher still. So the cook would have his birds, but Quentin would keep the silver plumes, which were grown only by the males during mating season. They would fetch a price twice their weight in gold when the next company ship arrived in port. By the time the next ship arrived, or at worst, the one after that, he would have saved enough to return to Paris and finish his business there. Until then, nothing and no one would interfere with the growth of his assets, least of all a thief in the night. He eased into the shadow of his cabin. The colony's priest wouldn't be the only one handing out penance tonight. Purple clouds shrouded the moon and stars. Tattered haze obscured the ground. To mortal eyes, the darkness beyond the fire's reach scowled as black as the inside of a tomb, but the vampire saw heat as well as light. One glance at the small, radiantly warm-blooded figure emerging from the brush, and his anticipation turned to horror. Then, just as quickly, to relief. The intruder was a very short young woman, not the girl he first assumed. He had been misled by her small stature and the gauntness of the limbs protruding from the stained deerskin shift. He certainly wouldn't be punishing her. The breeze shifted, carrying with it the scent of her sweat, traces of dirt and brackish water clinging to her person. It smelled like she had run through the swamp, away from the homesteads of the Bayou tribes and toward the French settlement, which made no sense. He hunted the swamps nightly. Alligators, panthers, and bears notwithstanding, nothing in the swamp was half as dangerous as the transported felons and fortune hunters inhabiting the hamlet of Nouvelle-Orléans. She scurried toward the fire, pulling up short near his abandoned camp stool. Feet ache, limbs burn, belly squeezes with hunger. and the great gangly man plays coy. As if I cannot see the trail his body cuts through the air, I will end this human quickly. My lips will suck the life from his lungs and swallow it whole. I draw a deep breath. My ribs spread in anticipation. Nothing rides the air but night, fire, rags, and dirt. Where is his breath? No lung-warm mist hugs his face. His chest does not rise or fall. He stares and stares. A hunter's trick. Cat poised to leap seems to stare forever, but look away. It will blink, twitch, breath will come, then the leap. Stays still. This cannot be. All living things breathe. The earth itself emits vapors. Nothing stands unmoving and unchanged. Nothing natural. Is he a puppet crafted by the newcomer from across the sea? The human who made him would be a prey worth taking. An elder's right, medicine-filled life would ease the sharp pain gnawing my belly. Ease, but not fill. The once thriving villages along the river are abandoned ghosts. The scattered survivors cower in dwellings sealed against me with medicine, salt, and ash. I have not supped in months. Thanks to these newcomers, I may never be full again. Where hides this elder? Not in the trees, no trace of human or spirit there. In the raised cabin overlooking the fire, the door yawns open. No charms adorn the jamb or lintel. No salt covers the steps or lines the threshold. No barriers to those who feed on human prey. A trap. Must be. This prey is cunning. So am I. On tiptoes, I peer inside. Cot, trunk, bench, basin. Smoked meat and stale bread. Strange-smelling solid milk. My nose wrinkles, but no taint of magic. I settle on my heels. What did I not see? Quentin cleared his throat and stepped into the light. Bonsoir. She started. Eyes wide, panting hard, she danced out of reach. But she didn't run or respond to his greeting, even when he repeated it. Buenas noches? I'd say hello, but I don't suppose you speak English, and I don't speak any native language. Talk about the halt leading the lame. His visitor's gaze traveled from his scuffed boots to his gore-splattered apron, then up to his face. Despite the mildness of the night and the warmth of the fire, she shivered and wrung her hands over her belly. Between his short-cropped hair and threadbare clothes, he knew he cut a less than prepossessing figure. But scaring women, that marked a new low. Was it his height? She barely came up to his chest. She must think him a giant. He crouched so his face was level with hers. Je m'appelle Quentin, he offered, touching his chest, in a gesture recognized by Americans and Europeans alike. Quentin de Charnay. Vous? He asked, pointing at her. She blinked. You, he repeated in English. You must want something, or you would have run away by now. She stared at him. He blew out a silent whistle. She gasped, her expression avid. Are you hungry? Would you like something to eat? He mimed, spooning gruel. Keep him talking. He breathes when he talks. He has life. Devour the sound in the air. More. I whimper, hunching my shoulders. I look up, eyes wide. See how pathetic I am. How harmless. You want to help me. And there I will end. If you're interested in that, that is in Dragons, Cats, and Formidable Fens. My giveaway, however, is a bit different. It's what happens when I do funding.
Thank you so much for sharing that extraordinary reading. All kinds of comments. We were right on the edges of our respective chairs.
Great. I'll read them. I'll read them as soon as my successor comes online. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean Marie. Our fourth reader today is Libby Schultz. Libby Schultz's debut novel, Win Condition, was inspired by her work as a founder in the crypto industry. Narrated by 5-time Audie Award winner Gabra Zachman, it received Book Life's editor's pick. She recently wrote an article on world building with digital currencies that will be featured in SWSW's upcoming blog on November 26, 2024. Over to you, Libby.
Thank you. I'll just get straight into it. That was a great prequel. So I'm going to start with my prologue, and that's just where the story begins. And the title of the prologue is All or Nothing. Tavi Xanatos gripped the edge of his terminal, knowing his knight would not return. As if in answer, the knight saluted and lowered his visor, its black armor shining as it marched away. His knight, a digital hero known as the Gallant, wasn't any more real than other assets in the sim. Yet who could call Breakpoint a mere game? The knight was his last chance to protect the life of an innocent man. Cultivated and patched through the ages, Breakpoint served as a proxy for war. A 30-meter hallway separated Tavi, a reclusive engineer who trained on AI sims, from his opponent and childhood hero, EQ Kiseran, 9-time world champion and treasure to his nation. Though EQ was past the usual retirement age, his ability seemed to only improve with time. With a few more victories, his 5-year winning streak would soon become 6. Tavi adjusted his camera to study the man he had trained to become for the last 15 years. His camera peeked through the crystalline walls of EQ's battle room to reveal a solemn face free of strain, giving not a hint of the 12 hours of battle that had left Tavi and his army broken and battered. Tavi curled his hand into a fist that routinely broke bricks, wishing it could smash down the door that secured EQ in his 5x5 meter chamber. But as long as EQ, Perfection Incarnate, entered a 32-byte hash at the top of each hour, there would be no physical combat. Which meant Tavi's 6-second flow knockout technique would remain useless, and which left Tavi fighting on the strategy board, pitted against EQ's nearly clairvoyant ability to predict his every move. Tavi waved a hand, and his view of the battlefield shifted into a panoramic display of the board. His knight moved into position and merged with a platoon of 20 soldiers, each unit indistinguishable except for the triple-plumed helm that marked the Gallant as the commander. His knight paced up and down the double-row formation, then pointed to the front line and yelled, "Move!" The platoon marched forward as one until they stood at a narrow section of a mountain pass overlooking a valley. A sea of enemy white swarmed below. Knight and platoon formed a wedge of black, staking their shields into the earth, then drawing their bows. Tavi bowed his head. "You will be remembered." Though he wasn't playing for the fate of a nation, Tavi was still being used as a pawn. The elite often coerced rivals into making impossible breakpoint wagers. Oran Karelian, first citizen of Char and leader of the known world, had forced a simple merchant to bet his life on Tavi's winning against EQ. When the merchant died, Horan would complete his third monopoly. News anchors had already declared EQ's victory as a foregone conclusion. A chime rang, signaling an incoming message marked with EQ's silver seal. It was an invitation to resign and get paid a small yet significant portion of the prize money, a custom from an older age meant to honor a worthy opponent. Touched that his hero approved of his skills, Tavi sat up a bit taller. Then the reality of the merchant's fate sank in. As soon as he accepted that money, drone enforcers could vaporize the merchant without so much as a make your peace. Tavi closed his eyes. His small startup that had poured his soul into for a decade needed that money, and the merchant's death was inevitable. But EQ's invitation to speed things along shattered the illusion that Tavi could play the game and remain innocent. He had known these kind of deaths happened, but they had always felt one step removed, atrocities committed by the oligarchy that stomped on everything to get what it wanted, surely nothing to do with regular folk like him. Disgust and rage whirled within, as the first citizen's unquenchable greed, at EQ's callous indifference, and at himself most of all for having dedicated his life to this game that culminated into such a despicable moment. Tavi sent his thanks and regrets, feeling simultaneously righteous and idiotic as he traded pride for poverty. I'm going to stop there. My audio narrator is a much better narrator than me, and so that is related to the giveaway today. As a little promotion for Sound Booth Theater, which is an indie audiobook platform, I'm going to give a copy of their of the audiobook away for free if you sign up. So you can listen to the whole thing. And it's also available right now on Kindle for 99 cents. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for reading with us today, Libby. That was really engaging. Get right down in there into the details of the game. And a dangerous game it is. Our fifth reader today is Carina Bissett. Carina Bissett is a writer of dark fiction and fabulism. She has written numerous short stories, many of which are featured in her debut collection, Dead Girl, Driving, and Other Devastations, 2024. And she is also a co-editor of the award-winning anthology Shadow Atlas, Dark Landscapes of the Americas, which came out in 2021. Carina, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I didn't know what to read today. My collection is mixed genre, but since it's Halloween, I decided on a piece of flash. It's titled The Stages of Monster Grief, A Guide for Middle-Aged Vampires. Ladies, you may have dreamed of a day when you no longer have to age gracefully or are forced into obscurity by a wardrobe filled with basic neutrals. You look in the mirror only to be confronted with sagging skin, pebbled cellulite, and wrinkles in places you never expected. You start to wonder if you'll be old and alone forever. A little bit of blood is worth the price a drink at the fountain of youth, isn't it? 1. Denial. And then it happens. Some figure seduces you from the shadows and you fall lovingly into their arms with your throat bared by a torn turtleneck. You think you've beaten the odds, only death is never as romantic as it is in the movies, and rebirth is downright disgusting. That $200 cut in color is reduced to a dirt-matted mop, and your nails are broken from digging your way out of a shallow grave. Don't even get started on the state of your skin. And they say Maid makes a magical facial. Call bullshit on that one. You blow it off, decide you were slipped a Mickey, and some teenage ass hat buried your passed-out body in a mound of moldy leaves as a joke. No Prince Charming dressed like Bella Lugosi. No sexy interlude behind the cocktail lounge. No throb of the forbidden. You refuse to acknowledge the truth, so you rub at the bruise on your neck and search through the closet for an even higher collar to hide the arterial bloom. The next day you call in sick. After all, you've been working at the college wearing your nicest smile for 20 fucking years. Don't you deserve some time off for good behavior? You've never acted on the impulse to fail a student just because they're a monster in the classroom, but no one has ever thanked you, not once. Screw that. When you wake up, the day has disappeared and September's harvest moon squats low on the horizon. You've been eating vegan in an attempt to lose the belly fat and to reduce cholesterol, but all you can think about is a nice, juicy steak, rare. And why shouldn't you treat yourself? You only live once, right? 2, anger. Okay, so maybe you didn't make it to the restaurant on your walk from campus to downtown, and those belligerent frat boys probably had it coming anyway. Back at home, you take a shower and toss your blood-soaked clothes in the bin. No more beige for you. From here on out, you will only wear velvet and lace cut seductively to show off the new you. But when you look in the mirror, nothing has changed. That crepey skin is still visible on your neck, your breasts sag without the support of an underwire, and the cellulite on your thighs appears even more dimpled than it did before. You go out the next night looking for answers from your vampire progenitor. You figure they have some explaining to do. Why can you see yourself in a mirror? Better yet, where's the goddamn fountain of youth? You wouldn't have wanted the cursed blessing if you knew you'd have to spend the rest of your presumably immortal days alone at the resting age of 55. What kind of sick fuck would do that, but damn you to that particular purgatory? 3, depression. You think about walking outside and ending it all with a little vitamin D, but you've never liked the sun, skin cancer and all that. You didn't wear wide brim hats, long sleeves, and your weight in SPF 100 for 30 years to go out in a blaze of glory. Instead, you go on a binge of boys and booze. It could be worse. 4, acceptance. You invest in corsets, light your home with candles. Still, it takes some time to let go of the modern perceptions of youth and beauty, even though you know from experience there's more to life than that. After all, you can deadlift a family sedan. You've gotten out of the academic grind with a few well-placed casualties and snapshots of your news. I don't give a fuck stylings turned you into an Instagram hit. Sure, those pictures are mistakenly titled Sexy at 60, but whatever. It doesn't take long before your memoir is sold as fiction for 6 figures and you start the popular blog. So you want to write a vampire novel? In between readings and convention appearances, you stalk the streets looking for one of your own kind. Even though you never found the vampire who turned you, or any other vampire for that matter, you crave a companion. So when you see the foxy lady astride a black beast of a motorcycle, silver hair streaming out behind her, you act on impulse. You pretend you don't notice it was a full moon, or that the howls dogging her trail sounded like wolves. It's in your nature, after all, you tell yourself as you dig a shallow grave with a broken fender. You tell yourself that she'll love you forever, even as you push the dirt over her drained body. She'll forget her lover with the moon-bright eyes. She'll forget the spat that sent her far from her pack. Your blood will triumph, you're sure of it. But when she rises, the silver-haired woman looks right through you. She stumbles away and leaves you behind to stare at an empty hole filled with nothing more than moonlight and frost. Over the distant sounds of traffic and sirens, a wolf howls. 5. Betrayal. Overhead, January's wolf moon watches you with an amused grin. The silver-haired woman breaks into a lope. You don't need a magic mirror to tell you how this will play out. The movies are full of stories about romantic triangles and unrequited love. If nothing else, you'll no longer be alone. You gather your cape and follow. So if I'm giving away one copy of the paperback to someone in the United States, so fill out the survey, and I'm also giving PDFs or EPUBs to anybody else who would like a digital copy. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carina. That was so much fun. Another character that we can all identify with at a somewhat different stage of life. All right. Our final reader today is Megan Bontrager. Megan Bontrager is a horror and SFF author currently based in Ireland, where she is a PhD candidate. Megan received her BFA in English from the University of Central Florida and her MA in writing from Johns Hopkins University. She is represented by Clara Tweeton of the Olswanger Literary Agency. Over to you.
Thank you. We're clopping down right in the middle here. You see the blurb here. Our protagonist Theo is going through it, trying to find her sister. And at this point in the book, right, kind of in the middle, she is turning to some conventional people to see if they can't give her some leads, given all that she's seen out in the woods. The neighborhood had thrived in the era of stockyards and meatpacking, the behemoth brick and metal-sided buildings rising like the town's pale imitation of skyscrapers over a single road that now showed signs of disuse. One was a brewery for a time, another a dance studio. But no life seemed able to take root beneath the faded signs of Bricknell cattle and Mercy stockyards, leaving nothing but empty space for transient groups of outcasts and junkies. A few of the buildings were occasionally reclaimed as ticketed haunted houses, poker club headquarters, and the like. They were far enough from the park, the only reason anyone would ever consider coming to this town, that they sat relatively undisturbed, their temporary inhabitants anonymous. Parked far enough from the address Wesley emailed me that I felt I didn't need to worry about any of his friends, contemporaries, constituents, taking note of my car. I was in no place to judge anyone. But given the nature of our correspondence, something told me it would be safer to keep my license plate out of sight and out of mind. The morning following my disappearance from the search party, I had woken to a barrage of emails, calls, and texts from my mother's friends, all of whom had assumed I had simply gone off to get drunk in the woods. They thought I'd pass out after soaking my head in the liquor that I stashed in the back of my truck and hadn't thought to reach out, save to reprimand me for bailing less than an hour into the search. I couldn't explain to them what I'd seen, what I'd done. Even as Quinn extracted the bullet from my thigh and wrapped the wound, I'd refused to go to the hospital. I couldn't explain it. What was I supposed to say? What was I supposed to have seen? I told Quinn and Delilah everything, and they hadn't once flinched away from the sheer ridiculousness of my story, not even at the appearance of my double. I'd written it off as something unreal, a product of a lack of sleep and the pressure of the day. I glossed over it in my account, and they didn't press me. They'd shut the blinds, drawn the curtains, locked the doors. No one in town had seen 3 men with primordial hellhounds strolling about, so I could only assume they remained in the forest, if they existed at all. How was I to know? When the 2 of them left, not a second shy of 24 hours later, I'd slunk to my laptop and opened Wesley O'Shea's email. I barely knew my own face in the dark laptop screen. Delilah had helped me into the shower, back turned while I washed the day from my skin, yet I still looked like a mad woman, bedraggled and wild-eyed. Maybe I was a mad woman. If I so willingly descended into a web of conspiracy theorists and urban legend sympathizers, I must have been at least a little mad. Or a lot. I chewed at the ragged edge of my middle fingernail as I hastened along the dilapidated sidewalk, through the open gate to the cannery, and toward the ramp leading to the single door in or out. Outside the door sat a man on a stool who looked exactly as I expected anyone here to look. His beard was long, his cargo pants stained. A picture of Mothman adorned an overlarge shirt and that half covered his tattooed arms. Christ. "You lost, ma'am," he said as I stepped onto the ramp. Not much of a greeting. I was prepared for this. I reached into my back pocket for the printed copy of Wesley's email, having guessed ahead of time that my word wouldn't be enough for people like this. Was Wesley O'Shea here? I didn't want to ask, but I had been spotted, so here I stood. Before I could even unfold the paper, his brows quirked. He answered with practiced confidence. Why would Wesley O'Shea be here? He said it without a smile, screwing with me, standing in my way because he could. I wondered what it might be like to smack the tattoos off his pimply skin, to rip at the curly beard hair that stretched down his thick neck. Oh, fuck off, I snapped. It was my luck that some freak show in a Mothman t-shirt would be the one thing standing between me and the only lead I had. I spun on my heel. I'll call him myself. From my car. His hands flew up. Whoa! Don't get bent out of shape. I know Wesley, obviously. He held his palm flat, gesturing for the paper I'd crushed in my haste. We're not exactly a conventional, convention. Gotta keep the non-believers at bay. Sure, I deadpanned, my lips pulled into a hard line. I waited as he scanned the email thread, eyes widening as his gaze darted between me and the page. Oh, damn, he said. Theodora Buchanan? Yeah, we know your sister's case. He'd be taller, though. Oh, I didn't care enough to correct him. Theo, not goddamn Theodora. Come on. He jostled from his stool and pushed the door wide. I'll take you to Wesley. We don't bite. The inside of the cannery looked like a macabre perversion of a comic convention, its attendees stranger than I'd imagined. I entered the cave-like building and was greeted by glaring LED computer screens, star maps emblazoned across wide beams, glass cases stacked with artifacts, if you could call them that. Booths lined the walls and quartered off aisles up and down the length of the concrete building, nearly every surface plastered with grainy photos of Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts. I spotted a Xerox photograph of Flora and me standing outside the ranger station, along with taped-up photos of every other hiker, camper, and the like who made our park so famous. Above the collage was a hand-painted sign that read in vibrant letters, "Take a hike to another universe." My stomach faltered. The picture of Flora was the same that I had pinned up in the shed in my backyard, though it bore the evidence of being displayed in multiple forums on multiple occasions. My steps slowed. Over the heads of the convention goers, all I could see was her. For a moment, I debated leaving. A picture of my sister had no place among UFOs, ghost sightings, and connect-the-dots maps of supposed Bigfoot encounters in the West Virginia woods. The people milling about the booth, making mystery porn out of her disappearance, were no better than the man who yammered at my shoulder, pointing out various booths and displays. A man in a green unitard and a hat bearing the Illuminati pyramid emerged from the nearest booth, followed by a man in a startlingly orange Hawaiian shirt and a name tag with a sloppily written Wesley O'Shea, exhibitor. Even from here, I could see where he'd begun to write another name, so I'd been right. This was an alias. Maybe he thought park rangers as violent and intrusive as other government agents. I couldn't blame him. Or maybe I could. As his sleeve shifted to reveal a Kraken tattoo stretched across freckled skin, I decided I could blame him for anything that I wanted. Seeing the dissonance between the empathy he'd extended online and the absolute mania in his grin now, I again had the urge to leave. It was just my luck that the only lead I had wore socks with sandals. It was easier to compartmentalize the socks and the sandals than the map of the UFO sightings on the wall, the life-size Mothman in the corner, or the tinfoil hats I would surely spot at any minute. Wesley was buffeted through the eddying crowd, glad-handing and rapping shoulders like he was some kind of celebrity. I suppose I was the only one here who thought otherwise. I was likely the only one here playing with a full deck, but I was in too deep to shirk off any offer of help. "Theodora," he called. "So glad you came." A few heads turned, and an eruption of murmurs bubbled through the sea of bodies surrounding the booth. Of course they knew who I was. I was the spectacle. And that is where I'll call it. It's available through Quill and Crow, the publisher, also Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever books are sold. Thank your local cryptid.
Thank your local cryptid, indeed. Thank you so much, Megan, for that delightful reading. What a fascinating crowd you've introduced us to. I'm sure that people will want to know what happens next, and we'll find out the truth about the missing sister. Dun dun dun. In the meantime, I would like to thank everybody who came out today to join our reading.